Part 1. Close your eyes and imagine an archipelago resting silently in the deep blue ocean. This is Japan, a land concealing an epic and profound history. For thousands of years, the generations living here have endured countless monumental transformations. These fierce changes forged and built the powerful nation we witness today. If you look at the world map, you will see a chain of islands tightly connected by the ocean. The geography here is a unique masterpiece, surrounded by towering mountains and dreamlike coastlines. These natural fortresses, made of rock and water, created a perfect shield, helping the native people grow and develop a completely unique lifestyle. When we step into the lens of history, we look at the past to decode the present. We absolutely do not play the role of judges. We do not pick sides or blindly decide what was right or wrong. Instead, we dissect the core facts to understand how countless events shifted through the dust of time. There were eras of absolute peace, but there was no shortage of dark times when the people faced life or death challenges and brutal wars. Every single person and every historical event acted as a glowing brick, building the foundation of an entire nation. The history of these islands is like an endless epic book. Every new chapter reveals a completely new turning point. We will witness how they rose from their primitive early life to become a modern, global empire. We will decode how they embraced and preserved their ancient traditions, while simultaneously building ultra-modern megacities. This is a magnificent epic about the people, the visionary leaders, and the massive earthquakes that shook their society. As we raise the curtain on this lesson, we are preparing for a journey through time. We will scan through thousands of years of evolution. We will witness how a small population expanded and grew into a famous and mighty country. This is the starting line of a long and fascinating story. Let us take our first steps into the past to decode how Japan forged itself to reach its ultimate position today. Part 2. The First People. The dawn of the first lives on these islands was ignited over 10,000 years ago. During this primitive era, the rhythm of life carried a pure beauty, deeply connected to nature. These early residents did not anchor themselves in one fixed location. Instead, they became relentless nomads, moving across the wild lands to hunt for survival. They lived as proud hunters and constantly gathered fruits, nuts, and plants from the deep forests. This overwhelming way of life granted them the privilege to survive by shifting with the changing seasons. One of the greatest legacies they carved for the future was their pottery art. They sculpted beautiful clay pots, carrying completely unique patterns. These treasures played a vital role in their daily survival, helping them cook and seal their food. As the wheel of time turned, the ice of the nomadic life began to shatter. Around 300 years Before the Common Era, a completely new epoch began. This was a time of groundbreaking developments. The biggest explosion was the awakening of rice farming. Before this moment, their survival relied entirely on the grace of nature. But now they held the supreme power to grow their own food. This power shift was a vital turning point, meaning they no longer had to exhaust themselves in endless migrations. They began to plant their roots in one location, to guard and nurture their crops. By anchoring in one place, they started to build permanent homes. These small clusters of houses birthed the first villages in history. This was the starting gunshot for a brand new agricultural civilization. Living together in villages reshaped the entire structure of human cooperation. They had to share the land and stand shoulder to shoulder to handle the massive labor of farming. During this golden era, they also unlocked the power of new materials. They learned how to forge sharp metal tools. These metal weapons possessed overwhelming strength compared to the old stone tools. They acted as levers, helping farmers slice through the earth much easier, and giving them the power to create finer things for their homes. Supported by advanced tools and an endless supply of rice, the population fire began to explode. These early residents were the first architects, laying the foundation bricks for the cultural empire that would soon rise. They executed a spectacular evolution from small lonely hunting groups into a social system that understood the power of land. This sharp turn toward farming and village life was the first giant leap in the long epic of these islands. Every swing of a metal tool and every planted rice field pulled them closer to building a massive and highly organized society. By twisting their strength together inside the villages, they birthed a community with a fierce life force, strong enough to survive for countless years to come. Part 3: Kings and Fighters. As the breath of the nation expanded, the burning desire for a supreme center of absolute power became incredibly urgent. Through sweat and blood, the people joined forces to build the first true capital city in their history. This was a monumental leap, deciding the ultimate fate of the entire nation. During these glorious years, they reached out to absorb countless breakthrough ideas from neighboring countries. Across the deep ocean, they birthed a complex system of writing and deeply studied the most advanced methods to forge a massive ruling government for the elite rulers sitting on golden thrones inside the capital. Their life trajectory was completely disconnected from the rest of the world. It was a golden era of absolute peace, where they held the privilege to spend their time on art and poetry. They wasted their peaceful days weaving magnificent verses and wearing the most brilliant royal clothes. They drowned themselves in a luxurious lifestyle and quiet academic study. However, the picture of survival was not painted with a single color. In the isolated countryside, The game of life was brutally harsh. The largest force was the peasant farmers, who had to plow the farming fields until their strength was drained. They struggled and fought to squeeze the land just to fill the stomachs of their families and pay blood taxes to the elite leaders. In the shiny city, their survival was trapped in the heavy chains of endless hard work and the changing seasons. These peasant farmers always lived in extreme fear for their own safety, because the ruling machine sat too far away in the glowing capital. The arms of power could not reach out to protect the small lives. In the distant villages, powerful rich landlords controlled massive areas of breathtaking land, but they were often absent from their own territories. They quickly woke up to a harsh truth. They desperately needed strong human machines to guard their interests and protect their land empire. Pushed into this corner, they spent fortunes to hire the strongest men to act as royal guards. These fighting machines were heavily trained in the art of weapons and were always ready, like a tight string, to jump into battle at any given moment. As the wheel of time crushed the passing years, these guarding forces absorbed ultimate power. They completely threw away their identity as simple workers. They transformed into elite and highly skilled warriors, carrying absolute loyalty to their masters. They were trained to worship honor and muscle strength above everything else. This was the birth cry of the very first warriors. In our epic story, this elite force began to manipulate and steer the entire operating machine of the country. They stripped away all interest in poetry or soft arts, like the capital nobles. Instead, their entire life force was poured directly into sharp swords and hurricane war horses. They lived and breathed by a strict code of death, forcing themselves to become fearless machines, always thirsty and ready for any brutal battle. As the powerful arms of these warriors reached out, the balance of power began to slip away from the capital city. The elite rulers still held onto their empty titles, but the true power of life and death was completely handed over to those holding weapons. The warriors rose up to become the new supreme protectors of the land, and their stormy rise permanently reshaped the entire historical flow of this archipelago. The fragile balance of power between the peaceful capital and the violent countryside was officially overthrown. The era of the warrior had crashed down, and it would bend every trajectory to lead this nation into a completely new path for countless years to come. Part 4. Making the country one. For a long time, the elite leaders inside the capital held absolute power. However, the wheel of time slowly began to turn. The supreme power of the central government started to fall apart, completely losing control over the entire archipelago. This was the opening gunshot for an incredibly dark and brutal era, falling upon the lives of the people here. Japan was officially dragged into a bloody whirlpool of constant wars that lasted over a century. History engraved this terrifying time as the Warring States period. Because the central government was weak and broken, countless different lords started to tear apart the peace of the land, rushing into brutal battles, showing absolutely no mercy. Every single lord was blinded by the ambition to manipulate ultimate power, and desperately wanted to conquer the most beautiful lands. The once great archipelago was chopped into hundreds of tiny shattered pieces. The smell of death and the sound of weapons echoed every single day. The peasant farmers were pushed to the edge of extreme terror, and the survival path for every living soul became a living hell. Families desperately had to hide, while countless villages were completely burned down and totally wiped out in the firestorms of these brutal battles. It was an era surrounded by extreme sadness and non-stop earthquakes of violent change. No one could ever taste the feeling of safety, because the rules of survival in this land were bent and overthrown every single day. However, the dark night of this long bloody era finally began to show a spark of light when three outstanding leaders appeared on the stage. These powerful men carried an overwhelming strength and a clear, brilliant vision to decide the future of the entire archipelago. The first pioneer leader was Oda Nobunaga. He was a brave god of war who ignited a chain of glorious victories across countless battlefields. He was the first general to boldly pioneer the use of modern weapons that no one had ever seen, turning them into a lever for his army to crush every enemy, even though he fell before finishing his great work. He was the one who laid the first magnificent foundation bricks on the path to rebuild peace. The second leader to step up was Toyotomi Hideyoshi. He was a strategic genius who captured the flag of power. After the first leader died, he poured his entire heart to tie the divided lords back together again under one single ambition. His burning desire was to witness a country that completely cut ties with the tragedy of fighting itself. And the third leader who locked down this historical chess game was Tokugawa Ieyasu. He was the one who harvested the ultimate glory among the outstanding trio. With extraordinary endurance, he patiently hid himself, waiting for the perfect moment to strike a deadly blow. In the historical year 1600, he achieved a glorious victory in a legendary battle that flipped and redefined the entire world order. After this victory song, he stretched his shoulders to become the supreme god, controlling all power across the entire territory. He applied strict military laws, landing heavy blows of authority, forcing all the lords to bow down in surrender and obey absolute commands. He created with his own hands a completely new ruling system, an iron mechanism, pinning every social class into their correct position. Thanks to his monumental work, the long years of bloody wars and fire finally came to an end. The islands were no longer torn apart into hostile pieces. Instead, they were once again united and melted together into one single national bloc. This was an earth-shaking moment, permanently changing the flow of history. Humanity could finally drop their heavy weapons and begin to revive in the light of peace. The humble peasant farmers could proudly return to their farming fields without being haunted by the ghost of enemy soldiers. And the trading routes began to flow heavily again between different territories. Part 5. A closed country. After the long bloody wars between different lords finally came to an end, a new supreme leader, named Tokugawa Ieyasu, took absolute control over the entire archipelago. In the year 1603, he became the new shogun. He made a bold decision to move the center of his ruling government to a magnificent city called Edo, which is known today as the glorious Tokyo. This massive move marked the beginning of a long and critical era in history to make sure the country stayed peaceful and totally stable. The elite leaders made an earth-shaking decision. They decided to completely close the borders of the country to the rest of the world. Because of this iron law, foreigners were strictly forbidden to enter the islands, and the local people were not permitted to escape or leave. This harsh isolation policy lasted for about 250 years. During these many years of sleeping in peace, the country transformed in completely unique ways. With no brutal wars left to fight, the people had enough time to develop a local culture that was totally different from any other place on the entire planet. This was a golden era when art and traditions were worshipped and honored by millions of people. Many citizens started to deeply enjoy traditional dramatic theater, which is famously known as kabuki. They also burned their time learning the careful and silent steps of the tea ceremony, which is a supreme way to show deep respect and find absolute peace inside their souls. During this peaceful period, the giant city of Edo grew extremely fast. It expanded and became one of the largest mega cities in the world. Waves of people moved from the countryside into the glowing city to work and survive. Because the ruling government kept the country heavily locked, the people were forced to focus their minds on their own creations. They built beautiful wooden architectural masterpieces and gave birth to new types of stunning art. The travel roads between different cities became crowded with travelers, and the domestic trade grew incredibly strong. Even though the world across the deep ocean was rapidly changing, the people on these islands stubbornly kept their own way of life for countless generations. This long period of strict isolation helped the nation forge a rock-solid identity. They learned to survive together without any influence from faraway lands. Every single breath was focused purely on order, beauty, and tradition. The powerful government kept a watchful eye over the citizens. To make absolutely sure that this expensive peace would never be broken, this time was silently quiet. But it was also a massive explosion of cultural growth for the entire archipelago. It was a unique era that would define the country for many years to come, long before it was forced to shatter its chains and open its doors to the world once again. Part 6. Opening to the world. For over 2 long centuries, Japan remained completely locked as a closed fortress. The national borders were heavily sealed, and only a tiny few outsiders were allowed to step inside. But this strict order was shattered forever in the middle of the 19th century. In the historical year 1853, giant dark ships carrying the heavy breath of the United States suddenly appeared near the silent coast. These massive war machines were much bigger and overwhelmingly stronger than anything the Japanese had ever seen before. These uninvited visitors demanded Japan to open its locked ports for global trade and communication. After a breathless standoff, the ruling government finally woke up and decided it was time for a massive change. They signed a historical agreement to throw open the doors to the outside world. This shocking decision ignited a terrifying era of huge transformations. In 1868, the century-long rule of the shoguns officially came to an end. The ultimate power returned directly to the emperor, and this golden new era was known to history as the Meiji period. The elite leaders of the nation deeply understood a harsh truth. The outside world was moving incredibly fast. They looked across the ocean at countries in the West and were shocked to see highly advanced technology, modern giant machines, and totally different ways of living. A burning ambition ignited in their blood. They wanted Japan to instantly transform, to become just as strong and intensely modern. To reach this goal, the ruling government started many new, massive national projects. They invited great minds from foreign countries to teach them about modern medical science and advanced engineering. They built giant factories to crazily produce goods for the global market. They also gave birth to a new education system, crushing the walls of illiteracy forever, so all young children could learn to read. One of the greatest macro changes ever was the building of a national railway system. Steam-powered trains became the bloodlines, connecting millions of people and making it incredibly easy to move heavy products across the entire country. To protect its throne and national survival, Japan desperately needed to change its military. They forged a modern army and a dominating navy with the latest warships. Millions of citizens worked extremely hard to absorb new skills and adapt themselves to this terrifying speed. It was a painful shift for many people, as traditional ways of life began to be crushed and fade into the past. However, the Iron Nation moved fiercely forward with a destructive speed. In only a few decades, Japan totally transformed. From a quiet traditional society into a highly powerful global empire. They learned like crazy. They built non-stop. And they proudly grew. Until the whole world respected their power. This sweaty and ambitious period was the real start of the modern Japan that we see today. It was a time of great discovery and extreme hard work that permanently changed the destiny of every person. These isolated islands were no longer alone. They proudly stepped onto the world stage to fight for their place among the greatest nations on the planet. Part 7. War and Building Again. At the dawn of the 20th century, Japan possessed a giant and highly destructive military war machine. Their dark ambition to grow their power and cover the globe with their influence pushed the country into countless bloody international conflicts. Eventually, these extreme tensions acted as a spark, dragging Japan into a major central role in a brutal global war. This fiery era brought devastating changes crashing down on the nation. The long and difficult conflict caused deep tragic suffering for millions of innocent lives. It was a pitch-dark time in the nation's history, marked by heavy losses and terrifying destruction across massive cities. In the year 1945, the Great War finally came to a tragic end. 2 deadly atomic bombs were dropped directly on the 2 cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, causing ultimate devastation that human eyes had never witnessed before. These historical events were a deathly turning point, leaving the entire country in absolute ruins. Proud giant factories were turned into ashes, and surviving people had very little food or basic supplies. It was a heartbreaking moment, forcing the entire nation to bow their heads and deeply reflect. They had to face the very high price of their bloody choices. However, the fighting spirit of these people never gave up. Right after the smoke cleared, Japan made a historical choice to completely change its path. The government and citizens turned their backs on brutal military power and focused their lifeblood on true lasting peace. They started the painful, hard work of rebuilding their broken homes and shattered society. It was an era of extraordinary effort. Everyone stood shoulder to shoulder, clearing the heavy rubble to plant the seeds of new businesses. Instead of building weapons, they poured their hearts into modern science and advanced technology. This miraculous recovery was truly unbelievable. Within just a few short decades, Japan completely transformed itself once again. The country exploded, becoming a global leader, famous for its rapid industrial growth speed and high-quality products. Billions of people around the world were frozen in shock to see how quickly a nation could rise from total destruction. This spectacular jump became famously known as the Japanese economic miracle. New mega-factories crazily produced modern cars, high-tech electronics, and advanced machines that invaded every corner of the global market. The focus of survival shifted from bloody battlefields to the global economy, and they grew stronger than ever before. This era taught the people vital core lessons about the golden value of absolute peace and the supreme power of working together. The entire country learned that true ultimate strength does not come from war, but from sharp innovation and elite education. By focusing completely on technology and trade, Japan healed its deadly wounds and proudly became a dominating leader on the international stage. The Great Rebuilding process was not just about stacking broken bricks back together again. It was a spectacular rebirth, creating a brand new identity for the nation. This era of hard work changed their destiny forever, setting the perfect stage for the highly modern society that exists today. It remains a highly powerful, living example of how a nation can overcome deep tragedy to build a rock-solid and better future for its children. Part 8. Japan Today. Japan today has transformed into an amazing empire that makes the whole world bow down in admiration. It has executed a massive evolution, leaving its tragic past far behind. Now Japan stands proudly as a supreme global leader in modern technology. The country builds highly advanced machines like lightning-fast trains, high-quality supercars, and intelligent robots that carry the weight of daily human life. These magnificent inventions are solid proof of the burning desire and non-stop hard work of the entire nation, stepping far beyond cold steel and machines. The Japanese cultural ecosystem has exploded and captured the global mind. Billions of people on this earth are deeply drowning in the anime universe, legendary manga comics, and epic video games born from these islands. These entertainment empires carry powerful stories that smash through every generation barrier. This modern pop culture brings joy to millions and cleverly spreads the unique Japanese spirit across the entire globe. In recent years, this Time Machine Nation stepped into a totally new historical era. In the year 2019, a new emperor officially took the throne. This glorious event hit the start button for the Reiwa era. It is a historical moment for the whole nation to look deeply into the future while never forgetting their epic and tragic history. The name Reiwa means beautiful harmony, which perfectly shows their burning hope for an eternal peaceful future. One of the most magical things about Japan is the perfect balance between the past and the future. If you step into a mega city like Tokyo, your eyes will be hit by futuristic tall buildings, glowing neon lights, and streets that never sleep. However, just a short walk around the corner, you will instantly be swallowed by the absolute silence of an ancient temple or a traditional Zen garden. Inside these peaceful places, people still practice quiet tea ceremonies and deeply hug traditions that are hundreds of years old. This breathtaking mix of ultra-modern life and thousand-year-old heritage is exactly what makes Japan so unique. Life in Japan today moves at a terrifying speed and is incredibly busy, but hidden deep inside is an absolute respect for other humans and Mother Nature. The people here still sweat and work hard to elevate their society and generously share their cultural legacy with the world. From the super busy mega train stations to the silent mountain shrines, this country is a living body that never stops evolving. Japan has bowed its head to learn from its bloody history, fiercely recovered from extreme tragedies, and successfully built a magnificent modern identity. This archipelago stands tall, like a time-traveling bridge, connecting the past and the future, to prove to humanity that extreme progress and ancient traditions can perfectly walk together in a beautiful symphony. As this iron nation moves bravely forward into a brand new era, it remains a magical land where millions dream to visit and learn. It is a place that continues to grow and drop wonderful surprises on the world every single day.